Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Where did all the neocons go? That's a good question. You know, the ones who took us to war and never brought us back? The likes of Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, Ari Fleischer, the ones that Colin Powell referred to as the Gensa crowd. The Gensa crowd, Gensa stands for the Jewish Institute for Security Affairs. And what is happening now, ladies and gentlemen, that a lot of people with the election of Barack Obama think that these people are gone for some reason. For 8 years, in the last 8 years, these people were able to and capable of destroying 3 countries. Our own is one of them. They destroyed Afghanistan and Iraq. Now with the election of Barack Obama, we see that maybe different caliber of people are going to be in power. Are those people any different than the neocons? Or is it just a different character for the role? Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's program we are going to be speaking with Dr. Stephen Sniegoski, who has been in the program before. He wrote a book lately. The name of that book is The Transparent Cabal. In it, he very much catalogs exactly who the neocons are, what their plans for America, Israel, and the Middle East. Lately, you can't talk about America and the Middle East without actually speaking about Israel and America and the Middle East. Something that was not there 8 years ago, even though, due to the media, the American public was and still is pro-Israel. We see that in the last 8 years, this closeness have become or became very visible. Many more people are siding up on the side of Israel, even though reality says we should be running away from this closeness. Well, tonight we are going to find out exactly why this closeness is, who these neocons, who are they, and at the same time, are they gone? Or do we have other players with the same strings attached? Before we go there, we are going to play a couple of clips. It kind of introduces what is happening and what is going on in this book. But at the same time, it will also explain this closeness relationship between the United States and Israel. Is it real? Is it fictitious? Is it good for us? Or is it bad? We're going to play the clips, and then right after we will go to Dr. Sniegoski, and we will also go to your phone calls. A lot of you are already lining up at the phones. Let's play the clips.
Next call is Los Angeles. Good morning.
Morning. First, I want to say I am a Goldwater Republican, so I'm not really from McCain, but all our national security bills and foreign policy bills are all written by AIPAC, a dangerous Jewish lobby, as well as the Gensa crowd and other Jewish groups who pushed us into a war with Iraq. Our country has been hijacked by Zionism, and Americans are dying for Israel. You can read it all in the Pretext for War book by James Stanford, and more info on neoconzionistthreat.com. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Any comment?
Not really, no.
Thanks for my call. I wanted to mention the Transparent Cabal about the neoconservatives. It's written by Dr. Sniegoski, and it's going to really focus. It's coming out very soon. You can order it at Amazon.com. And it's going to focus on Dick Cheney and the neoconservatives that were in close association with him that took us to Iraq and are now pushing very hard to take us to Iran. And if you look up what Colin Powell had conveyed for Washington Post correspondent Karen DeYoung's bio book about him, he had said, Colin Powell, that the Jinza crowd, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, which Dick Cheney has been associated with, and you could look them up on the Internet, is in control of the Pentagon.
You know, who knows? Lots of rumors fly around Washington about who's doing what. We do know that President Bush relied on a very small number of aides.
You support Ralph Nader? Why is that?
Actually, I'm an ardent Ron Paul supporter, but after hearing what Ralph Nader courageously said against AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby, and how basically it's influenced our wars in Iraq and the coming war with Iran, it's very concerning, and he had the courage to address that. You can go to neoconzionistthreat.com for more about that. And Chuck Baldwin, I mean, he makes some valid points about illegal immigration and securing our border, which I agree with. However, he danced around the AIPAC issue. Again, that's American Israel Public Affairs Committee that Ralph Nader addressed by saying it was a globalist agenda and all that. And that's what, you know, the conspiracy theorist talk show host Alex Jones likes to focus on instead of the real culprits here, which is, you know, members of this ardently pro-Israel lobby here in America that's pushed us into these wars. But I think I'm going to vote for Nader after I saw the courage he had to address the issue, especially with the pro-Israel lobby. And
it's
again,
a taboo
subject.
It used to be raised once in a while in the past, but now you look at the debates. Nobody raised it. Nobody asked anything about it. Everybody knows, who knows anything about geopolitical strategy and peace in the world, that resolution has to be subject to a vigorous peace prospect by the U.S. government, and it isn't. And if you don't talk about something, it's not likely that when they get elected they're going to address it. And it's getting worse and worse and worse.
Well, one of the reasons it's not, in my view, addressed by American politicians is there's an absolute hard and fast consensus among American voters that we're on Israel's side. America is pro-Israel. Everybody in public life, I am. I mean, I would say 80% of American voters describe themselves as steadfast friends of Israel. So, I mean, why shouldn't politicians reflect the views of the people they represent?
That position is not inconsistent with being a vigorous proponent of resolving the Palestinian-Israeli crisis. I think you can, in fact, one can say you can't be pro-Palestinian without being pro-Israeli, and you can't be pro-Israeli without being pro-Palestinian. But you cannot simply support the Israeli military policy against the Palestinians. Top government officials in our country said there's no military solution here. They've got to learn to live together. And the best resolution is to go back to the 1967 borders, have an independent, viable Palestinian state, and they'll start playing soccer with one another. The important thing here, Tucker, is that the second ethnic group in the United States that's most for an independent Palestinian state are Jewish Americans. Arab Americans having a higher percentage, but Jewish Americans over 50%. It's quite remarkable when you look at the polls. There is a growing disposition not to follow the Israeli lobby line in this country. And I must say that the taboo process here is simply making it worse for everybody concerned, and of course worse for the Palestinians. The ratio of civilian fatalities in Gaza to Israeli in the last 10 months has been about 400 to 1. They are being embargoed, blockaded, medicine, food, all kinds of essentials are not being allowed in. And that's only going to exacerbate the situation. Desperate people are the most dangerous people in these kinds of conflicts.
I must say I haven't noticed any residents of Gaza attacking America.
No, I mean, look, all they want is their own independent state. Okay. They want UN resolutions complied with by the Israelis. There are several of them. And also it's a Bush policy now to recognize the right of Palestinians to have their own.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard are different clips, calls to C-SPAN, the first three of them, by people who called in and asked about AIPAC and GENSA, the National Institute for National Security Affairs. And in most cases, ladies and gentlemen, the people on the other side will just freeze And by the way, the brilliant lady in the first clip is also with us from California. She's on the phone. We will be going to her call after we speak with Dr. Sniegoski, and also the gentleman in the second and third clip, also with us from California, and we will be going to him. But you have seen, ladies and gentlemen, every time there's no answer. When they tell them, like, look, AIPAC and AIPAC's policies is the one, basically the main principal reason of why we went to Iraq and destroyed that country, which is basically for Israel. The first gentleman there was the son of Talibani, the president of Iraq. He did not answer. He did not have any comment. Well, of course not. That was not a surprise, because the Kurds in the north, no one could be happier with AIPAC than the Kurds. Even the Israelis themselves are not happier with AIPAC as much as the Kurds. So of course he had no comment. What are we expecting him to say? Yes, because of AIPAC's policy, now we are in power? Of course not. Because of the Israeli Jewish policies that we are in power? Of course he's not going to say anything. And then, you know, the other calls, people freeze whenever they hear of JINSA and AIPAC. But yet, Tucker will make a statement that 80% of people in the United States are actually steadfastly pro-Israel. Why? How long did it take for people to be pro-Israel? Even though 10 years ago, a lot of people could not even place Israel or Palestine on the map. Now we have 80% of Americans with the same views as the neocons when it comes to Israel and supposedly democracy in the Middle East. How did we get here, ladies and gentlemen? The neocons are gone, but yet their opinions and their thoughts and their principles are live and well? Or is this new breed that we see in the White House, the likes of Rahm Emanuel, are they different than Paul Wolfowitz and Douglas Feith, who, by the way, Douglas Feith was also an Israeli, just like Rahm Emanuel, who will be, well, he is, the next chief of staff in the White House. His father, ladies and gentlemen, was interviewed by the Ma'ariv Israeli newspaper. His father is Dr. Benjamin Emanuel, who actually was in the Ergon organization. It's a Jewish organization, an underground terrorist group that blew up many places in Palestine before Israel was established. It was on the terrorist list throughout the Interpol and many countries throughout the world. His father, who worked for the Interpol, for the Ergon organization, had this to say, ladies and gentlemen. This was their some of their pamphlets, what you are looking at, and you can see what they are planning on and what Israel, the land of Israel, that they would like to have. But this is what his father just said when he was interviewed with Ma'ariv newspaper. This is the King David Hotel, ladies and gentlemen, this picture that you are looking at. This was, as a matter of fact, destroyed with weapons that was transported by, most likely, by Dr. Benjamin Emanuel, the father of our chief of staff now. He was a gun runner. So I don't know if he was the one to actually bring the explosives to these people. And also the Ergon is the one also responsible for the massacre of Deir Yassin, a little village on the outskirts of Jerusalem, where they killed men, women, children, etc., etc. But this is what his father had to say, ladies and gentlemen. It's a shame when we hear that his father, he referred to in an interview, he said that, talking about Israel and the appointment of his son into the position of chief of staff, he said his son appointment would be good for Israel. Obviously, he will influence the president to be pro-Israel. He was quoted as saying, why wouldn't he be? What is he, an Arab? He's not going to clear floors at the White House. Okay? So he said that his son is going to be an influence, a pro-Israel influence. And by the way, his son volunteered for the Israeli army back in 91. And he actually went over there. But he did not volunteer to protect America in the war that has been going on for the last 8 years. So his son, and this is what his father said that it is good. Obviously, he will influence the president. Is that why the powers that be chose Emmanuel in that position? So he can influence the president to be pro-Israel? He was quoted as saying, why wouldn't he be? What is he, an Arab? He's not going to clean floors at the White House. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't this a racist remark? Isn't this a horrible remark? As if Arabs are good only to clean floors? But Jews, the elite, he's not going there to clean floors. Of course, he's going there to be the chief of staff, the highest position in the White House. In the White House, he even have more authority and can do things a heck of a lot more than what Barack Obama will do. He's not an Arab. He's not going there to clean floors. Shame on these people. And you don't see anyone in the mainstream media saying, whoa, this is anti-Semitic, because the Arabs actually are Semitic people. But we don't see that. We didn't see people when they were saying he's black president, he's not going to be able to do it, he's not this and that. We didn't see people standing up and saying, whoa, wait a minute, you're racist. But if somebody says Jew, if somebody says Israel, they freeze. If someone says AIPAC, they freeze. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, the book again is the Transparent Cabal by Dr. Steven Sniegoski. And we are very happy to actually be having Dr. Steven Sniegoski to discuss his book and discuss exactly where are we going from here, and are the neocons are still there. But before we actually go into where we're going to go from here, let's see how did we get here. Dr. Sniegoski, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me on again, Hesham. I'm very pleased to be on your program once again.
Thank you, sir. It's our pleasure. Now, let's go. We did not know that Barack Obama was going to be elected the United States president. So now people think that we might be changing directions. But before we get to the direction changing, let's talk about how did we get here and what is your book all about. It looks like that you had taken the neocons, you explained who these people are, and how did they get us here? Just briefly tell our viewers what they can expect to read in your book.
Well, my book, the fundamental thesis is that the neocons were the driving force in the Bush administration's war on Iraq and the succeeding militant policy in the Middle East, and that the neocons were closely linked to the Israeli Likudnik right. Much of the neocon approach to the Middle East can be seen to have originated in Likudnik thinking. And moreover, I think it's pretty apparent that the Israeli government of Ariel Sharon worked in tandem with the neocons in supporting the war in Iraq. And since that time, the Israeli governments have pushed for wars on Iran and a stronger policy opposition to Syria in line with the thinking of the neocons.
Okay.
Now, it's my fundamental belief, and I think I bring it out in the book, that the overarching goal of both the neocons and the Likudniks was to create an improved strategic environment for Israel in the Middle East by weakening Israel's enemies. Now, you know, although sometimes people say the neocons are agents of Israel, you know, I can't really look into their minds, so I don't know that they really think in terms of supporting Israel at the expense of the United States. However, it is definitely apparent that the neocons view U.S. Middle East policy through the lens of Israeli interest.
Okay.
And the aim of the neocon Likudnik foreign policy was not simply to weaken Israel's external enemies, but by so doing to eliminate the internal threat posed by the Palestinians, because the Palestinians depend upon support, both material and moral, from these outside countries. And the idea is, by the neocons and the Likudniks, if the Palestinians were totally isolated, they would, ultimately cave in to any type of offer that the Israeli government would make. And I might add, when I talk about the Palestinian threat that the neocons and Likudniks perceive, it's not people blowing themselves up. The fundamental threat they perceive is a demographic threat. In other words, the very existence of the Palestinian people, in Israel proper and on the West Bank, poses a threat to the Jewish state. In other words, Israel is set up as a Jewish state dominated by Jews, where Jews are the superior group, and of course having a large, a numerous minority, and maybe even in the future the Palestinian population west of the Jordan River would actually be a majority of the total population. That certainly poses a threat to a real Jewish state, since obviously the Palestinians don't like to have the Jews superior to them in a country in which they would be living.
Okay. Dr. Sniegoski, I don't know if you listened to the couple of clips that we played earlier, but it was calls into C-SPAN programs, and callers have mentioned AIPAC and GINSA, and every time you mention AIPAC and GINSA and their effect and their influence on American policy, people freeze. They have no comment. I haven't seen anyone yet to actually comment or make comments to what the callers are discussing, which is the AIPAC influence and GINSA on taking us to the war against Iraq. Why is that?
Well, this is one of those taboo questions. People are fearful of acknowledging the power of the Israel lobby in the United States, because if one does that, one is labeled as being anti-Semitic. And we know John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt were brave enough to come out with the Israel lobby. My focus is on more of a limited faction within the Israel lobby, but a more hardcore, the hardest core faction, the neocons. But just bringing that up is not career enhancing in the United States. If one wants to be a media figure, major media figure, certainly it's would be suicidal, at least in terms of one's career, to make such a claim, because in fact the American Jews tend to be very powerful, and even those who are not necessarily neocon or take a real hardline position on American Middle East policy, by the same token, they become very upset if anyone points to any American Jews who are influential, that they see this as being threatening to them, that there would be anger against American Jews as a whole. So that's why, I put a major effort in trying to point out, yes, the neocons are motivated by their ethnicity. Most of them are Jewish, and, they do have a loyalty to the Jewish state. However, the neocons only make up a small percentage of the overall American Jewish population. But as I pointed out before, many Jews become very defensive if one ever points out the power of the neocons, and it can cause problems for anybody who holds such a position. And perhaps this explains why I'm able to, one of the few people who write on this subject. I'm, though I have a PhD, I am not a significant academic. I don't have an academic position, but the fact of the matter is people who have academic positions really don't, most don't want to take a chance to point out these obvious facts that should be apparent to anyone, though what I do is go to great lengths
if they do, they will not have
detail all the power of the neoconservatives in leading the country to war.
Okay. Now, let's see why back right before we went to war against Iraq, 78% of the Jewish community actually were pro-war, but now 78% of the Jewish community, 8 years later, they voted for Barack Obama. We see that significantly the effect and the influence of the neocons probably diminished in the administration, but yet we still see pro-Israel, such as Rahm Emanuel, and we see Jewish influence still very much strong. What difference does it make if it's the neocons or if it's the old cons? What difference does it make?
Okay. Hesham, first of all, I did hear what you said, but I could barely hear what you said. So if you could turn up the volume or something, it would make it a lot easier for me.
Okay.
But I did hear enough to be able to answer your question. And one thing, I think the neocons, yes, the neocons were still around. They were, of course, backing John McCain with people like Randy Sherman, Crystal, the Kagans. So the leading neocons were backing John McCain, who was a 200% neocon, far more of a hardline neocon, taking more hardline neocon positions than did George Bush, who was more or less of a convert to the cause and didn't really go all the way. Of course, McCain was defeated by Obama. Obama is supposed to be a man of peace, but we see, as you pointed out, on the Middle East, he is totally in support of Israel. So I think what we have is, while the neocons, I think, played a major role in shifting mainstream position in the direction of being pro-Israel and anti-Arab and anti-Islamic. In other words, the whole war on terrorism led to the description of all Arabs as being at least potentially terrorist, and anybody who is against them must be good. So in essence, whereas I think the Palestinians before September 2001 were to some extent, although, public opinion wasn't on their side, there was more of a view of them as being victims. Whereas since the war on terrorism, how the neocons, of course, manipulated this to attack Iraq and, other enemies of Israel, since that time, any type of resistance to Israel is considered terrorism.
Okay.
So to be a terrorist one doesn't have to simply threaten the United States. Just the threat to Israel is considered terrorism.
Okay.
So the Palestinians have really been presented in a very negative light. Israel has taken on a more positive light since the beginning of the war on terrorism. They're on our side against the bad, the evil people in the Middle East. So,
Okay.
this is one factor.
Can you hear me?
That the whole sort of view of the situation has changed. And, of course, then the Israel lobby that Mearsheimer and Walt point out, which, as I said before, the neocons are sort of the hardest element of the Israel lobby.
Okay.
They're always pushing for what the interest of Israel, and of course they have a very
Sniegoski.
strong political power in the United States. So Barack Obama, who wanted to be president, apparently felt it was essential to do everything he could to cater to the Israel lobby, because he perceived that if he did not do this, he would not win the presidency. So the Israel lobby was skeptical of Barack Obama because in his earlier times, before he sought high political power, he was friendly to the Palestinian interests.
Can you hear me?
So he had to go out of his way to show that that was not true, to cater to the Israel lobby. And of course, now he has gone to such a great extent that he's brought in Rahm Emanuel. And of course, as you point out, Rahm Emanuel has a very extensive ties to Israel, his father being a member of the Irgun,
Dr. Sniegoski, can you hear me?
Rahm Emanuel going to Iraq in 1991 to serve in the army. He also played a role.
Can you hear me, Dr. Sniegoski?
I guess it was the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in 2006 to support Democratic pro-war candidates, and to
can you hear me?
Shunt aside those Democrats that tended to be more anti-war.
Okay,
so,
very good. Can you hear me, sir?
Obama showed his support for the Israel by doing this. Perhaps he felt he had to in order to sort of make sure there wasn't strong opposition, once he becomes president.
Dr. Sniegoski, can you hear me?
Obama is basically doing this for political reasons, whether he would perhaps change.
So he's supposed to be
if
getting
he
this.
felt he was powerful enough to do this, but we can't. We would have to.
Dr. Sniegoski, can you hear me?
That the likelihood of that happening.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, we're gonna try. We're gonna try to go to the phones. We have people waiting.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Let's go to line 1 with. Actually, don't have the people on the phone anymore.
Did I talk too long?
Yes, we do. Rachel is on line 1. Rachel?
Yes.
Yes, you're. If you don't mind, just turn down your TV or computer a little bit, and you have Dr. Sniegoski with you.
Okay, I'll try.
Very good. We're gonna try to go to the phone.
Okay, listen to me on your phone, not on your computer.
Okay, I'll try to mute it. It's muted.
Yeah, there's a little bit of delay on the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stay with me on the phone. Yes,
it's
go
an
ahead.
honor to talk to you, Hashim.
Thank you, Rachel. Are you there?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Do you have a question for Dr. Sniegoski?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to talk to you. It's an honor to talk to Stephen Sniegoski. And I just want to say, well, first of all, neoconservatism is not gone. In fact, this administration, in my opinion, is just a nightmare waiting to take place with Rahm Emanuel and Ross, and then Axelrod is in there too. And a bunch of them are neocon, Zionist, AIPAC, Israeli firsters that are going to put Israel before anything, and it's really scary. By the way, your book is mentioned a lot on neoconzionistthreat.com, and I think everyone should look up that website because actually James Morris, you can see him confronting Scott McCullen.
The phone isn't working
because he
and the computer's not working.
What happened and what happened with us in the war with Iraq. But he will not mention, for whatever reason, how AIPAC and the Israeli government pushed us into it. And
okay, Rachel, stay with me for a second.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Dr. Sniegoski, were you able to hear her?
Is this phone off?
No. Can you hear us? Dr. Sniegoski, can you hear us? Can you hear me, Doctor?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Is your phone on or something, Patrick?
Yeah, if you have other people in the house probably listening,
Hello?
you might have, the sound might be a problem there.
What is it?
I don't hear anything.
Can you hear me
You
okay
think the
now?
phone is off? I no longer connected with him?
Okay, I'll tell you what. We're going to try.
Okay, I'll
I'll
just
tell you
hang
what.
up
We're going to. Can you hear me? Okay, let's call him back. Apparently, he can barely hear us. We're going to call him back, Rachel. But listen, while I have you on online, that was a brilliant call you made. Of course, we played your call, the first call that we did tonight, and it's amazing how people can't answer. I mean, like the son of Taliban, or Talibani actually.
They never could answer it.
Yeah, he couldn't answer it. This is when you talk about AIPAC, and he knows what you're talking about. Everybody knows what especially at least these people know what you're talking about, but they can't. They're not willing to even touch that subject. Why do you think that is?
Because they're covering up for them. They're scared. You know, it's like they made a pact. They are pro-Israel. They're in that realm, you know, and of course it's like it's like a mother protecting her den, you know, her cubs, and that's what they're doing.
Now, how can we get everyone in the United States to be like Rachel? What happened that Rachel knows a lot about AIPAC and JINSA, etc., etc.? How can other people in the United States actually get to the information you have?
Actually, it's from reading books like Steven Seagal's book, The Transparent Cabal, also Walt Mersheimer's book, The Israeli Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. Also, there's a book by former Congressman Finley called They Dare to Speak Out. And there's other books out, a lot of books out there, actually. James Morris, when always emailing me information about this stuff. You know, I grew up, you know, I have an Arabic background myself, and all these Jews that, you know, you dare to say anything about AIPAC or what Israel is doing, and you're labeled anti-Semitic, and most of those people aren't even Semitic. They don't know what a Semitic is.
Exactly.
You know?
Well, Rachel, I appreciate your call. Apparently, we're still trying to get hold of...
Hello, I'm on again.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, somehow it got disconnected or something. I don't know.
Well, no, actually, you couldn't hear us, so apparently you hung up. But you can hear me okay now.
Right, and I couldn't hear you for about 5 minutes, though.
Right.
So I assumed there was some...
Okay.
I didn't know if I was still on or not.
Very good, very good. Well, we have Rachel with us on the phone, and she's saying that the Neocons really, they're not gone. They're still there. Even while Barack Obama is president, their influence will still be there. Do you think she's
wrong?
Well,
they're certainly outside the administration. They do have, you know, apparently, Rahm Emanuel is certainly in you know, he's not by, you know, definition a neoconservative. He's not involved in their groups.
But what's the difference between Emanuel and Douglas
their views. Also, there's talking about Dennis Ross being appointed some leading figure on Middle East affairs. Now, Dennis Ross advised Clinton. He was pro-Israel, but he wasn't quite as hardline as the neocons. I've been reading that actually, you know, during the Bush administration, he did support all of Bush's hardline policies on the Middle East.
Okay.
So it looks like he has moved toward a neocon-like position, and you know, he apparently will be in the Obama administration.
Okay.
Now, one danger with Obama is that because he has the image of being a man of peace, should he take a hard line, against Iran, or a very tough line on the Palestinians, he probably will have greater American and international support because of his image as a man of peace. In other words, if he's for something, many people will think it must be a good thing. That is, people who if Bush or Cheney pushed it, they wouldn't believe, they'd be less supportive of the position. So, that's why I think, Obama could in certain ways be more dangerous than McCain would have been, even though McCain is overtly much more harder line pro-neocon position on the Middle East. But Obama has greater credibility
Rachel,
and would
for your
get
call.
greater support.
Thank you so much for
and
having me on.
hardline position in the Middle East.
Okay. Very good. We're going to go back to the phones with James Morris on line 2. James?
Yes. Thank you for taking my call. Am I on there?
Yes, sir, you are.
Oh, thank you, Hesham. You do an excellent job with your program. It's an honor to be on your show again and be there speaking with my good friend, Dr. Steven Sniegoski, as well, and commend him for the excellent work he's done with his recently released book, The Transparent Cabal. What I'd like to say is I was just listening to the internet broadcast on the delay and got part of Steve's comments, but what I'd like to bring up is I caught his comment about Dennis Ross. If you go to that same website that Rachel had just mentioned, your first caller, Rachel, there's another America First Patriot, by the way. Anyway, if you go to neoconzionistthreat.com and you scroll down on the right-hand side there to the YouTube video, What Motivated the 9/11 Hijackers, you actually see me confronting Dennis Ross a few years ago in Washington, D.C. at the 9/11 Commission hearing with Lee Hamilton, and I'd actually mentioned that he was associated with the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC, and it turns out that he's been working with the AIPAC spinoff think tank in D.C., the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And I just pulled up an article online, and it looks like Mr. Ross is going to be involved with the Obama regime as well, in addition to another high-level AIPAC operative, Rahm Emanuel. Actually, Rahm Emanuel had even escorted Obama, President-elect Obama, to that AIPAC annual gathering where President-elect Obama had actually pandered to AIPAC like he did. Anyway, back to Dennis Ross in this New York Times article. Apparently, he is collaborating, or was collaborating, with an official from the McCain campaign, even before the election, to actually attack Iran. And he now has that in the works. So, we talk about President-elect Obama being this anti-war candidate, yet we saw him running for the Senate, a few years ago. He'd actually endorsed missile strikes in Iran at that time, and you can look that up online as well. And so he was pandering to AIPAC even back then. And, of course, AIPAC, I'm referring to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Got some prominent journalist friends in D.C., and I've had one of them at least tell me that that's the most powerful lobby that Washington's ever seen, even more powerful than the NRA and ARP, the senior citizen lobby. So it's very concerning. I also wanted to bring up a couple of additional issues with Dr. Sniegoski. I actually had mentioned his book, Transparent Cabal, to the former PNAC chairman, Bill Kristol, at the American Jewish University a couple of nights ago, and conveyed that he was, referenced in the index of the book, and I asked him what he thought Obama would do about Iran. And he went on to say that he thought President Obama would actually pursue it diplomatically at the UN, try to get harsher sanctions, and that would more than likely fail, like the attempt at quote-unquote diplomacy has failed with the current Bush regime. And then harsher measures would be, they would try harsher measures like getting additional sanctions at the UN, and that more than likely would not go through with Russia and China blocking the way, I would assume. And then he said that President Obama would have to make a tough decision. And he basically was conveying that military action was in the works. So if anybody thinks that President Obama, with his prior comments of advocating missile strikes in Iran when he's running for the Senate, is an anti-war president, I don't think so. Not to mention what he wants to do, putting additional troops into Afghanistan and agitating the situation in Pakistan as well, with the continued airstrikes on the tribal areas, the federally administered tribal areas in Pakistan. So, he's hardly the anti-war candidate. He's got a lot of people duped. Including friends of mine who were very much against the neocon hijack regime of President Bush, and they think that Obama is the Messiah. And I beg to differ. He's a very dangerous man, I think, potentially.
Okay, very good. Dr. Sniegoski, did you hear what Jim said?
I did. Let me just, and I agree with everything he says. Let me just add a point. I think if it had not been for the neocons, though, if George W. Bush had had his father's cronies running his foreign policy, like Baker and Scowcroft, we would not have been, we would not have made war on Iraq. If that had not taken place, the mainstream opinion would not have been, moved in such a pro-Israel, hardline position against the Arab and Islamic states as has taken place. So I think the neocons have to be given the credit or blame for moving the United States in this direction of being opposed to the enemies of Israel, to be strongly opposed to the Palestinians. So Barack Obama is only, fitting into an environment that has been shaped by the neoconservatives. Obama himself, had he been president in 2001, I don't think he would have driven us into war. But now he is a politician, and he sees where the power is, and he goes to where the political power in the United States is. Of course, that may be very detrimental to the interest of the United States in the world, and of course it also could be very detrimental to the rest of the world.
Dr. Sniegoski, it seems like it doesn't matter who's in power, AIPAC will still, and JINSA, rule. So it doesn't matter who's in power, they still rule. How is that? Is that possible?
Well, yeah, but they're under, I think we could say under Bush, yes, Clinton was very pro-Israel, but he never went as far as the neocons would like him to go, that is, making war on Iraq. George H.W. Bush, of course, although he did get, I believe, somewhat manipulated to go to the first Gulf War in 1991 against Iraq. However, he would not go as far as the pro-Israel forces as the neocons wanted in terms of eliminating Saddam and invading Iraq at that time. And of course, both the elder President Bush and his Secretary of State, Jim Baker, did try to put pressure on the Israelis to reduce their settlements on the West Bank. And of course, the whole Israel lobby was outraged in 1991 and 1992, and of course they were vehemently against the elder Bush and probably played a role in his defeat. So in essence, I don't think all presidents have been the same, but yes, there's always been support for Israel. There's never been a fair deal for the Palestinians, but I think over the years, Americans have become more pro-Israel, and of course there was a quantum jump leap forward with the Bush the Younger administration, with the neocons getting hold of the reins of power, at least for a short period of time, and not simply, help Israel at the expense of Palestinians, but actually went after, had the United States go after Israel's external enemies.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, don't you think that the neocons had a role to play? They were like characters in a play on stage, and now the stage demands a different character to actually be on stage. Don't you think these two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are playing different roles for the same director?
Well, I think you probably can make that argument. As I pointed out before, the neocons, by their very militant activities, they generated a certain degree of opposition in the United States. That their wars probably, I think really would generated much greater opposition than would a war put forth by Barack Obama, who, as James Moore pointed out, if he fails, if Iran doesn't go along with the diplomacy that Obama offers, then, the only thing he would be left with would be war. And, many people might say, oh, yeah, he gave the Iranians a chance for peace, and they wouldn't accept it. So, we have to, war is certainly justified. So I think, the idea of good cop, bad cop, does play a role.
So,
and I think that's one position that the late Israel Shahat, the Israeli commentator who was critical of Israel's policy, strongly critical, would point out, yes, there's good, and he did it from the Israeli perspective, that the Labor Party was the good cop, the Likudniks were the bad cop, but they were all seeking the same goals. So I think there's definitely something to what you say. That yes, on the surface, Obama seems more moderate, but it's conceivable. War could be started, as easily or even perhaps more easily by him than by an overtly hardline position like John McCain.
Okay. Now, in 1 minute, we only have 1 minute left. What do you see in the next 4 years? What do you think will happen very quickly, as far as the Middle East is concerned?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I do think, it's correct. Obama, he's not offering the Iranians anything. If they reject it, it's conceivable we would have a war, especially because I think the economy is going to get even worse. I don't think any of these bailouts are going to bring prosperity, and sometimes leaders of countries can see war as a way of diverting the public's attention if they're failing on the domestic front. So if he's failing domestically, that would give more impetus to take a hard line and even a war in the Middle East. Even though with our economy collapsing, it's more difficult to fight in the Middle East, I think that would be a likely possibility, but I can't really give odds. Certainly, the economy is a big if. Most Democrats right at this moment wouldn't want this, wouldn't expect it at all. But I think just like no one expected George W. Bush to be going to war in 2001, they thought he was going to pursue a more humble America in his foreign policy. He quickly shifted over. I don't think it's totally unlikely, or even unlikely, that Obama will do the same thing and
Very
move
good,
to
sir.
a hard line Middle East policy like the Neocons would like.
Very good, Dr. Stephen Sniegoski. The book, again, is The Transparent Cabal, written by Dr. Stephen Sniegoski. I think everyone needs to give them a copy to see exactly what happened in the last 8 years, how did we get there, and where we're going. Now, your book is available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, Amazon, and if you just know, if you can hit Transparent Cabal, you should be able to find it, even if you don't know how to spell my name. But I believe, my name is pretty much around the internet, so you should be able to find the how my last name is spelled. But Transparent Cabal should get it if you go to Amazon, and I think I give a very good explanation, backed up by a lot of source material
Very
to
good,
show
sir.
that the Neocons were the driving force behind the war.
Unfortunately, sir, we are completely out of time. I just have time to say thank you, sir, for being with us. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on again, Hesham.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, time is gone. We only have like half a minute to say we're back. The honeymoon is over. And, you know, we're not going to expect a much different change, especially when it comes to the Middle East and when it comes to Israel. Israel will always get what Israel wants. They took away Douglas Feith. They're giving us Rahm Emanuel. No Joshua Bolton, Rahm Emanuel. Same people. Good night. See you next Thursday.
The views and opinions expressed in the previous program are strictly those of the segment producer and do not reflect the views of Acadiana Open Channel, its staff, Board of Directors,